often think that skipping a grade is rare or risky or only for geniuses, but the research on acceleration actually shows us something very different. In today's video, I'm breaking down exactly how whole grade acceleration works, who it's right for, who it's not right for, and what the research says about long-term outcomes. So let's talk about it. The first thing is, what is whole grade acceleration? It's essentially when a student moves up one full grade level. It's used very often in gifted education, a lot more often than people actually realize, and it's usually recommended for students who consistently perform 1 to 2 years above their peers. Now, this isn't just an academic switch because it involves social emotional considerations as well, which we'll get to later on in the video. Let's talk about some common myths. The first myth is that they'll struggle socially. But the research actually shows us that accelerated students show equal or better adjustment long-term socially. Another myth is that they'll have gaps in their education, and a lot of times if a student is actually ready to grade skip, they won't have gaps. And if they do, then curriculum compacting can very quickly fill in those gaps, and they rarely struggle. The other myth is that kids need to stay with their age peers. That's actually not true. Students benefit a lot more when they're in a placement with intellectual peers and not necessarily students that are at the same age as they are. Decades of research show us that acceleration is the most effective and the least expensive option for gifted students, and long-term outcomes actually show higher academic achievement, higher graduation rates, and higher life satisfaction. Acceleration is not harmful when it's done with proper evaluation, and we'll talk about that next. The Iowa Acceleration Scale is the tool that most schools generally use to see if a student is a good fit for whole grade acceleration. The Iowa Acceleration Scale is a document, it's a rubric that provides teachers and stakeholders a way to make a really fair and unbiased decision for the student. It incorporates things like academic readiness, cognitive ability, achievement data, social emotional maturity, the student's actual aptitude or ideas towards acceleration. Do they actually want to do this? The family support, and then the physical maturity as well. Like, is the student about the same size as students in the grade that they'll be most likely moving to? Now, let's talk about some signs that a student might be ready to grade skip. The first one is that they perform 1 to 2 years above grade level on all subjects. So that's math, reading, science, social studies, everything. If they finish their work quickly and accurately, if they're showing advanced reasoning and analysis skills, if they're asking for more challenging tasks, and if they're appearing unmotivated because the work might be too easy for them. Another sign is that if they thrive around older or more intellectual peers that are at their intellectual level, if they have strong executive functioning skills, or if they respond well to coaching. And then another thing is that just because a student is twice exceptional, which means they might have a disability, doesn't mean that they're not a good candidate. Some of these students are really great candidates. It just might mean that their supports and their services for their disability might need to continue in the next grade level. But academically, they might be ready for a whole grade acceleration move. Now let's talk about when acceleration is not the best option. So the first obvious one is if the student doesn't want this. If there's strong resistance from the student, I would put the brakes on that and just don't proceed, because if the student doesn't want to be whole grade accelerated, it's not going to be a good situation for anyone. Another reason why a student might not be a good fit for this is if there's large gaps in their foundational skills, like those basic skills like sounding out words, or one-to-one correspondence, or basic addition, subtraction facts. If they don't have those things down, that might not be a good fit. They might need more time to really master those things before moving on to a higher grade level. If they have a lot of anxiety, or if they avoid tasks due to perfectionism, this student might not be ready to skip a grade yet. If there are other executive functioning struggles, like with self-control or with planning ahead, that student might need some more time to develop maturity before they're ready to grade skip. Another one is social maturity, especially when it comes to peer interactions. So making sure that you're really looking at how they're interacting with their peers and are they mature enough to handle being with older students. Another one is acceleration might not be the best option for students who work very slowly or really need a predictable routine, because in a grade skipping situation, they're moving to a whole new grade level with a whole new set of students, with a new teacher, with new curriculum, new expectations, and that just might not be the best fit for them if they prefer something kind of slower and more predictable. All right, so let's say you have a student that is doing really well academically, but you see that they're not ready for a whole grade acceleration. Let's talk about some alternatives that would still meet that student's academic needs without putting them in a stressful situation like a whole grade acceleration. So if you're not sure if whole grade acceleration is the right move, you can try single subject acceleration. So at the elementary school level, it might look something like, let's say you have a third grade student who is doing uh, on grade level work in reading, but in math, they're really excelling. So maybe in third grade, they get to go to the fourth grade math class, but for all the other subjects, they stay with their third grade peers. That might be a really easy way to meet that academic need without needing to do a full whole grade acceleration. They're just going to be single subject accelerated just for that math class. Now, this doesn't always work out neatly because of scheduling and things like that. But some other things that you can look into are enrichment programs or pull-out gifted services. This is very common. And in those pull-out gifted services, sometimes students can receive what's called compacted curriculum, where they might cover 1.5 to 2 years of curriculum, let's say in math, in 1 year. This happens a lot, like when students are trying to go to high school, then a lot of times the 8th grade curriculum will be compacted so that they're ready to take Algebra 1 when they get to high school, things like that. Or sometimes even students take Algebra 1 while they're still in 8th grade so that when they get to high school, they can test out of Algebra 1 and take the next higher class. Another idea for older students is dual enrollment. Let's say you have a high schooler who, let's use that same example of the student is kind of on grade level with reading, but in math, they're above grade level. If that is the case, they could take their reading, social studies, science classes in the morning at their high school, and then in the afternoon, they can go to the community college and take above level math classes at the community college. So that might be a really good option for students that are in high school or in upper grades to really meet that need if they're not ready for full grade acceleration. All right, so let's talk about what happens before students skip a grade. The first thing is there needs to be some sort of pre-assessment to make sure the student is actually ready for this skip. Based on that pre-assessment, some of the curriculum might need to be compacted to make sure that they're ready for that grade level. Some schools will offer a trial period, maybe a couple of weeks or a month, to try out the new placement before fully committing to it. That gives schools a time to say, well, you know what, this might not be a great fit. Let's go back to the original grade level that the student was in. And then the other thing is there needs to be some sort of transition planning. A lot of times schools will plan to do the grade skip after a break, like after spring break or after winter break. The best time is really summer break, because then socially it's a little bit easier because students have that summer to kind of adjust. And then sometimes there's summer school programs they can take to get ready for the next grade level. So that is something that can help as well. Some things to consider if you're a parent considering a grade skip for your child. The first thing is, this might not be very important to everyone, but for some parents it is important. If you want your child to play on a sports team, especially a travel sports team, a lot of times they're required to try out for their age band. So if they're in a higher grade level, they might be playing on a team with technically underclassmen, which again, if you're not worried about your child going into sports, this might not even be a consideration, but it's just something to think about. If your child is interested in sports, it might impact them later on with some of the sporting events that they might be eligible for or not eligible for, just depending on what kind of rules and stipulations they have there. Some other things for parents to consider if you are preparing for a grade skip, or if you're preparing to have this conversation with your teachers or administrators, is to start collecting work samples to show what your child is capable of doing. And then you can also ask for above grade level assessments. Let's say you have a third grader who you think might be ready for a grade skip. Ask for those fourth grade level math and reading assessments and see how the student does on those. If they're mastering above grade level assessments, that might be a really clear indicator that they're ready to grade skip. Another thing to consider is to ask your district or your school if the Iowa Acceleration Scale is used. There are other things you can use, but that is really one of the best tools to use to determine if a student is ready for a whole grade acceleration plan. And then also always try to keep the conversation positive and collaborative. Remember, teachers, parents, administrators, we're really all on the same team. We're all trying to help students get to where they need to be and achieve their full potential. So we're really all on the same team. Let's work together, right? Now, if you are a teacher, here are some things you can do to support a student that is coming into your room that is accelerated. The first thing you can do is to pre-test before each unit. This will give you a very clear idea of what gaps there might be in that child's education, and you can really intentionally work to fill in those gaps to make sure that they're on track to mastering their curriculum. The pre-assessment might even show you that the students already mastered this and they might need something more challenging beyond what you're going to be teaching. Another thing is to support their executive functioning, things like planning ahead, if there's any projects coming up, reminding them of that, because again, they might still be getting ready to be in that other higher grade level. Always be open and communicating with parents about how things are going, and also monitor their social and emotional adjustment. Are they making friends? Are they getting along with peers? That's another thing to kind of keep an eye on. Decades of research tell us the same thing. When students are ready, acceleration works. With careful planning and ongoing monitoring, whole grade acceleration can be the most effective way to meet gifted learners' needs. If you found this video helpful or if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe.